Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, she, they, and this is Literally Graphic. And today I'm looking at the nonfiction work Kent State, 4 Dead in Ohio by Derf Backderf, and published just a few months ago in September 2020. Content notes for violent historical event, military violence against civilians, mass shooting, union busting, lots of guns, arson, use of tear gas, and bleeding to death. As far as the nature of the violence goes, while succinct, it is graphic. All the content notes I listed happen in frame. From Ohio, I've actually been following Derf Backderf on Facebook for a long time. He is perhaps most famous for his nonfiction work, My Friend Dahmer, which I reviewed previously in a wrap-up that's now private. He also wrote a fictional story based off his time as a garbage man that has been on my TBR for a while. And drawing from his Wikipedia page, the Hive Mind says, Backderf's art has been compared to Robert Crumb, with his use of black to project character and menace. Derf cites Crumb as an influence, along with Mad Magazine and Spain Rodriguez. He cites Expressionism as the inspiration for his usage of heavy ink, but feels the major influence on his work is the imagery of punk. The focus of the book is obviously the historic massacre of university students by the American National Guard during the Vietnam War. Backderf does a very good job of not only retelling the events leading up to the massacre, as well as citing all his sources, but also filling out the context of many other things that were also happening at the time. Obviously, a book a long time in the making, it's an excellent reminder of how redundant history and current events can be. In particular, the way in which the Students for a Democratic Society, aka SDS, and Weather Underground were constantly brought up reminded me a lot of how people were discussing anti-fascists this past year. The Goodreads summary is as follows. On May 4th, 1970, the Ohio National Guard gunned down unarmed college students protesting the Vietnam War at Kent State University. In a deadly barrage of 67 shots, 4 students were killed and 9 shot and wounded. It was the day America turned guns on its own children. A shocking event burned into our national memory. A few days prior, 10-year-old Derf Backderf saw those same Guardsmen patrolling his nearby hometown, sent in by the governor to crush a trucker strike. Using the journalism skills he employed on My Friend Dahmer and Trash, Backderf has conducted extensive interviews and research to explore the lives of these 4 young people and the events of those 4 days in May, when the country seemed on the brink of tearing apart. Kent State, 4 Dead in Ohio, which will be published in time for the 50th anniversary of the tragedy, is a moving and troubling story about the bitter price of dissent, as relevant today as it was in 1970. End quote. A tad bit on the thicker, and in my initial perception, wordier side, I certainly thought I would find this book more intimidating than it ended up being. A very engrossing story. Backderf uses text much more judiciously than I realized, and there's a lot communicated visually with highly varied page layouts. As I already mentioned, I did feel like this book does try and fill out some of the context around the events pretty well, not only in how terrifying having an ongoing draft would be to people who might get pulled into a war at any moment, but also in showing some of the other struggles that were also happening at the same time. SDS and Weather Underground were obviously referenced quite a lot. We also get glimpses at some labor struggles, and the dynamics of race, at least as far as notions of black and white, do make an appearance. It was also interesting to see how the community around Kent State was changed by the presence of the growing university and how they reacted to the events this book covers. While there was not a whole lot of disability representation per se, I did appreciate the way that Backderf represented the spectrum of ways people were impacted by the shooting. Obviously, 4 people died, but a number of people were severely injured and had to live with that for the rest of their lives. On the negative side, however, someone does call another person a gimp, which seems realistic for the time, I guess, but I wanted to give people the heads up. Sexuality is perhaps the most glossed over, but I could see how that might not have played a role in this particular historical event. Thinking about how I would rate this book, I do think it will have to be 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot deny that Backderf is extremely good at what he does, and the skill with which this very important story is told cannot be denied. The one thing I generally look for in nonfiction that I am perhaps giving this book a bit of a pass on is its lack of perspective. Obviously, there is a small spot at the beginning where Backderf does depict his own place in relation to events, but usually I would want a bit more. I feel like I didn't look for that as much in this book because I do follow him on social media and I already knew how local and personal the story felt for him. Just for y'all keeping score at home. If I ever have time in my busy schedule, I will definitely be visiting and revisiting more of Backderf's work. Bye y'all, keep reading and resist white supremacy. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.